So, um, the question is, which is better for expat living, Colombia or Brazil? Um, all right, so I'm just going to hit on these points, and this one's kind of interesting. Uh, you can't be deported from Brazil if you have a child in Brazil. It actually doesn't even have to be your own. Um, but many people didn't know that. Yeah, that's a fact. So, number two, um, although Brazil, it's easier in Brazil. Well, I don't want to compare number two to number one until I've had a chance to talk about this in detail. All right, so it is a little easier to get a Colombia digital nomad visa. I don't have one now, but I've definitely looked into it and I've considered the different factors. Essentially, in Colombia, you can get that visa and stay in Colombia. You don't have to go anywhere. You can apply for it in Colombia, do the whole deal, etc. So this makes Colombia a little better than Brazil. Number two, politics. Unfortunately, they're both leaning left right now a little bit. Brazil historically has been better politically. I mean, mainly because Brazil has a history of political violence. I mean, sort of imagine the Democrats and Republicans in America where they would hire militia and assassinate opponents, take over local, the city, town hall or whatever the municipal building is in some city, and they'd fight it out. Now, that was a long, long time ago. It's not now, but it still exists in the culture, really. There's slightly more red tape in Brazil, generally. So that favors Colombia. Now, one thing to note, I'm going to come to the conclusion that I'd say Brazil is better. So just because one factor favors one over the other doesn't mean my final conclusion isn't Brazil, because it is. But not for everyone, because for some people, some of these factors may be more important to you. So your own decision obviously could be different. Cost in Colombia, it's a little cheaper in Colombia across the board. I'd say about 15% less. But again, this really depends on your city, right? If you're over here in Barranquilla, that's great. But if you're in Medellin, it's more expensive. Likewise, in Brazil, if you're up here in Fortaleza, Recife, that is much cheaper than Rio de Janeiro or, God forbid, Sao Paulo, right? So now in Brazil, one thing I like is this. I had a girlfriend tell me, if you don't open your mouth, Robert, se você não abre a boca, I forgot the exact Portuguese, but if you don't open your mouth, they don't necessarily know you're a foreigner in Brazil. And I'll come back to that. I'm going to go into this in just a second. It's a little easier for at least me to get chicks in Colombia than it is in Brazil. Don't know why exactly. Have a couple ideas why, but the reality is there. But they're both good. I mean, they're both good for this, and you may not even care that much. You may say, well, whatever. Brazilians have more respect. They really do. Brazilians have more of a society that's, they have 230 million people there, right? Or 220 million or 230. I forget how many, but you can Google it. It's just, and it's more removed from the United States. Colombia, Dominican Republic, especially Dominican Republic, you can really feel how they're sort of like a little bit of a backyard to the United States. I don't know how to explain it, but this is true. Personally, now I like Portuguese more than Spanish. Now, Colombia, obviously, it's much easier to bop back and forth, right? If you're going to be coming to and from the United States, it is better. But a lot of people don't realize that there really aren't that many flights going directly, like let's say you want to go to Fortaleza, you've got to go through Sao Paulo, right? A long, long time ago, there were some flights in the United States that used to go directly up. Here's Fortaleza, it's in Ceará, right? Go directly from Miami and Fort Lauderdale to Ceará. A long time ago, there aren't right now. They don't have it. If you're coming from the United States, you've got to go through Sao Paulo first, and then you're jumping up to Bahia or you're jumping up to Recife. So you've got to go way down here and then boom back, right? It's just, people don't get that. People don't understand it. It's not like Europe where you've got flights directly from Lisbon to Fortaleza. Lisbon, Fortaleza, boom, right away. Now it's still 8 hours or so that way, but so, of course, that really favors Colombia. Okay, so now, what is this business here? If you have a child in Brazil, you can't be deported. And why is that important? What is that? Are you worried about getting deported? Okay, so, and if you don't believe me, you can go look at some of these links, right? You can check it out for yourself. Estrangeiro com filho no país não pode ser deportado, né? Okay, right? You can go look at these links if you want to. You can find it out. So why would that be important? I think it's a fire extinguisher solution to anything that could get screwed up or held up in the visa application process. If you're planning on getting your permanent residence in Brazil and you've got a child by a Brazilian woman, even if you're not married, okay, they're going to give it to you. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, okay, no matter what. And that includes if you've been convicted of crimes, if you don't have a good economic situation, you're married, not married, it doesn't matter. If your paperwork's off, all this red tape crap, no. The Supreme Court, the Brazilian Supreme Court has ruled on this, okay? And it's been very clear. You can go check as many links as you want to. You may want to translate your search queries into Portuguese. They'll turn up better results. And that's that, right? I mean, I like a fire extinguisher that no little petty bureaucrat can mess with, right? It's like a parachute. Like it's like, you're fine. I think you get the idea. I think that's very important, right? And there are Brazilian chicks who are more, they're kind of, you will find them willing to have kids with you. Trust me. Now, it is easier to get a digital nomad visa, and as far as I know, other types of visas as well. And one reason I can tell you, I researched the digital nomad visa, which I'm for Brazil, and I went down to the consulate. I was in Portugal at the time. I was in Lisbon, and I talked to someone there, and it ended up just being, I realized, gosh, I've got to do this, that, the other. It can't be applied for within Brazil. There's more requirements, so much red tape. You've got to essentially, I would have to go back to the States and wait around near a consulate for 2 months, 3 months to get everything done. And it's just, so I don't like that. And yeah. Okay, so now what's this business? Politics, leaning left, leaning right. Well, here's the channel. It's very good. I've got 5.42 million subscribers. Os pingos nos is. No, that means dotting the I's. Os pingo is like a dot, and nos is on or in the I's, dotting the I's. It's slightly conservative. They're against Lula, this one. Now, so Brazilian society is starting to slide slightly to the left. I was around during the last election. in Brazil when it happened. It was very close. It was a margin of about 2%. It was very close. But so I don't like that because, well, for a lot of reasons. It shows that it represents a disintegration of society in general. Okay. And not going into politics or anything like that, really. But one thing I will say is in Colombia, you may not know this, but Colombia has a history of political violence that is much, much more serious than Brazil. Okay. Without going into the weeds too much on that, I would say that it still exists in Colombia, and I can feel it in the culture of the people. It's this sense that it's kind of a zero-sum game. They get more aggressive when they feel that there's a conflict of interest. There's much more deceit, and they're oriented directly towards power in Colombia more than in Brazil. So I think it is worthwhile to note in Colombia from 1945 roughly to almost the middle of 1955, there was a time, and they're called the years of violence. I don't remember the Spanish, but where essentially you had political parties. They were the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party were engaged in essentially an undeclared civil war. Some estimates put the number of dead during that period of somewhere between 40 and 50,000 people. And that involves people arming themselves along political lines. Okay? And so they resolved it in part by a dictator came to power in 1953. It's Pina, forgot the name. At any rate. These two gosh darn political parties had to agree. They split power between themselves for 16 years, and they alternated administrations. Okay, 4 years Liberal Party, then 4 years Conservative Party, then 4 years Liberal Party, back and forth, and then they did that, and that curbed a lot of the political violence. The problem is, though, where are the real free and fair elections in that? Not quite. Essentially, you've got a double cabal. You've got both sides of the aisle agreeing to just say, well, we're the only game in town, and so politically, I would say Colombia is somehow less mature or more negative, I guess you could say, negative than Brazil. And yeah. So, okay. Now let's get on to the other ones here. This is the most important, I'd have to say. This is the most important. Even though I don't get quite as good at chicks in Brazil, I just feel like I can relate to them much more. In Colombia, I tend to get... One thing, in Colombia, people are always trying to deceive each other. Okay? They're always trying to deceive each other. And I noticed this in Russia. I've been to Russia a long time ago. And I noticed that Russia is doing... Well, I'm not going to try to talk about any kind of like what's, international politics or anything like that. But I would just say that, they were also very deceptive, and it's not a hallmark or beacon of a healthy, friendly, good society. Regardless of where people are economically, it's not a good thing. So, and don't get me wrong, I think Colombians are friendly. I generally do feel that they are friendly people. Okay. And I appreciate that and I like that. Okay. But hey, I'm going for ones that are more that way. This is a comparison between Colombia and Brazil, right? I am making relative general comparisons. Okay. So Colombia is a little cheaper. It is a little cheaper. I would say also, here's another one. Say that Colombia is more dangerous than Brazil. Assuming you don't go into a Brazilian ghetto, right? You don't stay in there. But yeah, I would say Colombia is more dangerous. I got to put that on there. So yeah, so these are the things that I consider when I would say Brazil is better. Okay. Now, so let me go over here. So I have some web pages or blogs. This is Robin Fortaleza. Okay. I made this about a year ago when I was in Brazil. And I made this one just now because pretty soon I'm going back to Brazil because my visa is about to expire here in Colombia in very shortly. So I'm going back to Brazil for 6 months, maybe longer. Who knows? You'd never know. You know, you'd never know. Maybe it will be longer. And my girlfriend in Cartagena, you know, she didn't stay with me. She didn't, you know, I guess she wasn't that serious or what. I don't know. But so so I went apart from her because she left me, not vice versa. It's not, you know, she's younger than me too, right? She's 33 and I'm in my early 50s, so it, you know, she might have found someone better than me, you know, on those dating apps. I don't know. And then I met a couple other ones that are pretty good. They're pretty good, but the way I look at it is you've got 6 months if you stay in one of these visas, and if you're meeting girls to the end of the 6-month period, well, that's not good because if you've got only a month left or you've only got 6 weeks left in your visa, you've got to leave. How can you really develop too much of a relationship? You can't. So I'm much more optimistic during the first maybe 2 months, during the first half of my 6-month stay. I'm much more optimistic that, oh, okay, well, great. If I meet a girl, maybe it could get serious. Maybe I could get married, and then I'd stay in Colombia or I'd stay in Brazil. Prefer Brazil. Right? Prefer Brazil. But towards the end of a trip, I'm kind of like, oh, man, you know, it's a little more risky trying to develop a relationship with a chick when you know you've got to leave the country in 4 weeks or 5 weeks or 6 weeks. That's not so good. Anyways, now, rich and poor in Brazil. Rich and poor. Here's the deal. This is taken in Sao Paulo. Here's a ghetto, and here, you know, rich houses like this. This comes back to the issue of envy. Okay? This one right here, envy. Brazilians have always struck me as being very non-envious. Okay? They're just not envious. And now that may be changing. Right? When you see someone like Lula coming around and winning, that's a sign that kind of envy's rearing its head to some degree. There can be other factors that lead to that, but at any rate. Now there is a gap between rich and poor in Brazil, and this is taken in Sao Paulo, but by the way, as a footnote, I hate the crowded place like Sao Paulo. No good at all. This is why places like Recife and Fortaleza are better. But at any rate, so there is rich and poor in Brazil. And well, okay, I've answered all the questions, or I've touched on these points. So I think that's as far as I'll go for this video. Have a good one, you guys. Oh, yeah, that's another thing. I have, well, you can look in the description. In the description, I will leave a link to my other channel, my Brazil channel, right? I've got a Brazil video channel, and it has stuff on how to extend your visa in Brazil and stuff like that. Have a good one.